Welcome to this explainer. For over a millennium, pre-Islamic Arabia was a giant chessboard of shifting kingdoms and ancient rivalries. But out of all of them, there is one that completely changed the game, leaving a mark quite like no other: the Himyarite Empire. Today, we're going to unpack their incredible history and explore the precise, almost genius mechanics behind how they rose to absolute, staggering political dominance. So let's dive right into the central mystery we're tackling today. How exactly does a tribal confederation, tucked far away in the rugged highlands, manage to outmaneuver ancient superpowers, conquer an entire massive peninsula, and build the most dominant centralized political system of kingship in all of South Arabia? It's a fascinating blueprint for an ancient superpower. Part 1. The origins of the Himyarites. Let's take a look at this mountain tribe. To really grasp their staggering rise, we first have to start at their rocky, humble beginnings. The Himyarites didn't just wake up one day with a vast empire. They literally had to carve it out of the mountains. When you look at the historical timeline, Himyar completely anchors the region as the undisputed dominant power in southern Arabia from the late 3rd to the early 6th century CE. For a long stretch there, they stood absolutely alone. But of course, they started much smaller. Around 110 BCE, they were just a tribal confederation breaking away from the larger Qatabanian kingdom, slowly but surely forging their own distinct identity. Originating in the rugged southern highlands of modern-day Yemen, they set up their capital at a place called Zafar. Now, this wasn't some sprawling, accessible coastal hub. Not at all. It was nestled safely away at a dizzying 2,800 meters in altitude, far removed from the bustling main trading ports. Getting there meant navigating circuitous valleys and rough, unpaved roads. It was an isolated, highly defensible mountain fortress built right across a curving chain of extinct volcanoes. Honestly, it was the perfect, ultra-secure incubator for a rising political power. Which brings us to part 2, their economic engine, specifically their agricultural power. Well, how exactly do you fund a sprawling regional empire from a secluded mountain peak? A fortress is great for keeping people out, sure, but empires require massive, massive amounts of capital. Early on, international trade in frankincense and myrrh provided a ton of wealth. It brought in so much revenue that the Roman author Pliny the Elder actually called them the richest nations in the world. But here's the catch. Trade routes are fickle. They shift. And as the Roman Empire began to Christianize, the demand for pagan incense dropped off. The Himyarites realized pretty quickly they needed a much more reliable engine to sustain their political rise. And this reveals their true superpower: mind-blowing environmental engineering. Himyarite rulers didn't just build infrastructure. They used massive hydraulic structures like the incredibly famous Marib Dam as literal instruments of their political authority. They took a region with severely limited rainfall and transformed it into an absolute machine, generating massive agricultural surpluses. We're talking extensive terraced hillside fields and brilliant runoff irrigation systems right along the margins of the desert. But pulling that off, that required a deeply stable society and a rigorously organized workforce. In turn, all that agricultural abundance became the rock-solid backbone of their entire economy. Moving right along to Section 3, military expansion and unifying South Arabia. Fueled by that immense agricultural wealth, the Himyarites took their highly organized society straight to the battlefield. They launched a systematic military expansion that was just lightning fast. We see them evolve from a localized splinter group to completely unifying South Arabia. After breaking away from Qataban in 110 BCE, they dealt a heavy blow to the venerable kingdom of Saba around 25 BCE. By 200 CE, they had actually swallowed up their old masters, Qataban. And finally, around 300 CE, they conquered Hadramawt. For the first time in centuries, the entire southern Arabian region was united under one banner. They achieved a territorial grip that simply hadn't been seen there for over 1,000 years. Section 4. A highly strategic religious conversion. Okay, so the military conquest is largely complete. But now, Himyar finds itself stuck in a very dangerous geopolitical chess match against encroaching foreign superpowers. This is where their political savvy goes off the charts. Just picture the political map of the time. To the west, you've got the Christian, Byzantine, and Aksumite empires. To the east, the Zoroastrian Sasanian Empire. To fend off the religious and political meddling of those heavyweights, Himyar made an absolutely ingenious move. Around 380 CE, they strategically adopted Judaism. By making it the institutionalized religion, they carved out a neutral, unifying third option.
It kept the Byzantine proselytizing at arm's length while completely avoiding subservience to Persia.
It was a massive overhaul. They systematically shut down pagan temples dedicated to ancient gods like Almaka and replaced that whole polytheistic pantheon with a monotheistic state religion centered on a single deity, Ramanan, which means the merciful or the Lord of heaven and earth. And the archaeological record backs this up beautifully. Suddenly, polytheistic inscriptions just vanish, totally replaced by Hebrew and Aramaic terms. This was way more than a spiritual awakening. It was a masterclass in using religion as a political tool to forge a highly unified cultural identity across all their diverse, conquered lands.
And that leads us to Section 5, their absolute zenith of power. So the real takeaway here is how this specific, unique blend, agricultural mastery, military might, and intense religious unity, created an absolutely unstoppable force. At their absolute peak, the Himyarite political grip stretched way, way beyond Yemen. They pushed deep into the Hijaz in the west, dominated the Najd in the center, and ruled the Assa oasis in the east, literally reaching the borders of lower Iraq. To manage that massive footprint, they cleverly used local proxies, like the Kinda tribal confederation. They were so powerful they were sending ambassadors to the Romans and the Sasanians, expertly playing the world's great empires against one another while reigning supreme in Arabia. But all of this leaves us with a really fascinating thought. Despite all their brilliant political maneuvering, their rapid military conquests, and that unifying state religion, the Himyarite Empire was fundamentally built on a foundation of rain-fed and irrigated agriculture. So what happens when unprecedented, severe droughts hit in the early 6th century? The massive hydraulic systems began to fail, internal religious conflicts suddenly flared back up, agricultural yields absolutely plummeted, and that mighty Marib Dam eventually collapsed. The very environmental engine that built this superpower ultimately sealed its fate, paving the way for an Aksumite invasion in 525 CE and the dawn of a whole new era in Arabia. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of our own political and economic stability today is quietly reliant on the predictable, everyday patterns of the natural world? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.